Hey Elle, how y'all doing? Hope you're doing well. My name is Dave. I'm currently a senior in the class of 2021 at Walter Johnson High School in North Bethesda, Maryland. And today I'm going to be telling you a little bit about the Montgomery County Council, which is the legislative body of our county here in Montgomery County, Maryland. So who are they? They are the principal legislative body here in Montgomery County. Their power comes from a little bit from state law, but mostly it's from our county charter, which is essentially our constitution. Their general jobs, they set taxes and appropriate this money into the budget. They oversee our land use and our zoning practices, which are very specific. They oversee our county programs. They confirm all the major executive branch appointments and appoint members to all the county commissions. But outside of major county appointments, we give all of our positions to county employees on a merit system that's also in our county charter, and it's very extensive on who's allowed to do what. And then they sit on 6 different standing committees, as well as occasional other smaller committees that pop up. So the commissions, so it's citizens. They're appointed by the county council. Usually it's members of the public who apply for consideration to be in these commissions. And they go through a full interview process. There are restrictions on members of any one political party. So usually most commissions are 5 people, and it can't be more than 3 people from any one political party. And so we have a few major permanent commissions. So the first is we have the planning board, which is the council's principal advisors on land use and community planning. They tell you they make recommendations on who's allowed to use land for what, and infrastructure projects we want to build, and all types of things with that. And they work with another board, they're parallel in Prince George's County next door. So they generally work together. Then we have our Board of Appeals, which is basically, our next level up from the planning board, where people who have an issue with the zoning ordinance or something they want to do special with their houses, they can make requests to vary from it, and the board will hear that and they'll vote on it. And our last major standing commission is our redistricting commission. So obviously the county council, we have districts. And just like the U.S. House of Representatives or the Maryland State House, we redraw our districts every 10 years after the census. The next one that's going to happen is in 2022, and then every 10 years after that. So we have 11 members on this commission. It's really interesting because you can't have more than 4 from any political party that voted, that received a total of 15% or more of the total votes cast for council members. So essentially that's Democrats and Republicans. So you can't have more than 4 from either of those parties, which means you're going to end up stuck with 3 independents, which is very interesting because it does not reflect the voting patterns in Montgomery County, which is far more Democratic than that. And then you get at least 1 member from each of the current council districts has to be on this commission. So the new map is due by November 15th, the year before the redistricting takes effect. So this year it's November 15th, 2021. And if the county council does not pass a different law on it, then the plan that the commission passes becomes law 90 days after they submit it. So the committees. So there are 6 standing committees. They meet regularly. Sometimes they meet jointly when there's an issue that can't be addressed by just one of them. They have a lot of power. They have the ability to review budgets. They have oversight over programs. There's a list of the committees you can look at. It's generally just tackling all the major different problems underlying the county where, a lot more goes on at the local level than you might think. So the council itself, it is currently 9 members. We have 5 who are elected from each district, the way the House of Representatives would be. And then we have 4 at large, the way U.S. senators would be. In 2022, we're expanding this to 7 districts and 4 at large because we voted on that in the 2020 election. They get elected to 4-year terms in our even numbered years when there's not a presidential election. So again, the next will be 2022, then 2026. They have a term limit that says they can't serve more than 3 consecutive terms. But if they serve for 3 consecutive terms of 12 years and then they take 1 off, then they can come back. So every year the council, they elect their own officers. So like president and vice president. And the president's going to make a little more money, but generally everybody's making a lot of money. It's about $140,000 a year, which is significantly more than our median income in Montgomery County. And we're going to get into later how much more that is than other counties in the state, but it's a lot. So every year they elect their own officers. They elect a president and a vice president. They do this in December. It lasts for 1 year and then the new term goes on. It's not usually going to be the same person year to year to year. They set their own pay, which is kind of unique. Sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes it does. It doesn't obviously get to change during their current term. The U.S. Constitution says the same thing for our senators. And then the council, it's had nothing but Democrats since 2007. And that's incredibly unlikely to change anytime soon. Even when we do draw new districts, there's only 1 or 2 places anywhere in this country up near Damascus, anywhere in this county rather, up near Damascus that will ever vote Republican. In general, it's an incredibly Democratic county. Being obviously a suburb of DC, it's essentially an extension of DC. It's the metro area of the city. It's very young, very educated, very rich, very Democratic here in Montgomery County. So here's a map of our current districts. Obviously, this is going to change very, very soon. So the first district, we've got, South County, we've got Bethesda, Potomac, out to west in Poolesville. Second district, we're looking at, up county, Damascus, Clarksburg, Germantown. Then the third district are the two of the major cities. We've got Rockville and Gaithersburg both run in there. That's where a lot of the stuff in the county happens. Like the county seats are in there and the major programs are there. The fourth district, obviously there's some more of up county, but then we get down into the Wheaton, Aspen Hill extension of Silver Spring area. And then the fifth is mostly just Silver Spring and its extension, and Tacoma Park's thrown in there as well. We'll see what this changes to. I suspect maybe, they'll give Gaithersburg and Rockville their own districts. Up county might see more. I don't know. We will end up seeing. It'll be very interesting because we don't really know what the redistricting is going to look like. And now we're getting into actual passage of legislation. So they're limited. They can only meet for the purpose of passing legislation 45 times a year. So they're usually going to meet on Tuesdays. I'm not sure why. That's just the date they picked. They're holding a lot of times outside of this 45. They'll have public hearings and forums, especially in the evening because they want to be accessible to the people. They'll meet with different groups in the county. They'll hear testimony from you. Pretty much everything that they do, except for some very private, sensitive information, is going to be public record. Maryland has very strict open meeting laws that force them to stay, open to the public and displaying all of their actions. Along with that, pretty much all legislation has to wait for reasonable public notice to be given, which basically means the information gets put out. We wait a couple days for people to formulate opinions and they get to come in and testify on it. We have this special thing called expedited legislation when something's super sensitive, for example, closing down for a pandemic. You can pass the legislation faster than that, but it needs more votes to do it. The public gets to testify at public hearings for all bills, which is our best way to interact with the county council and tell them how we feel. You get to go there, you get to speak at them for a minute. And a lot of the work that actually happens for this legislation is the council's staff. They do a bunch of research and they prepare information. They give the council members a packet of information on each bill that tells them, what it says, what its impact is going to be, who's supporting it, who's against it. So really help make their decisions on that a lot easier. So most of our legislation, you only need 5 votes, which is a majority to pass. For a couple special circumstances, so our expedited legislation that I was talking about, or removing a council member or overturning a veto, requires 6 votes, which is in parallel with our state's 3/5 requirement. So when our council expands from 9 to 11 members, it's going to be 6 votes to pass most legislation and 7 votes for our special votes. And then once it's passed, the legislation goes to the county executive office. They have 10 days to act on it. They can either pass it within the 10 days, or they can veto it within the 10 days, or if they don't do anything, it passes into law anyways. And so most of our legislation goes into effect on the 91st day after it becomes a law. But we can write into the bill, a different time that we want to see. So oftentimes they'll write something longer. Sometimes they'll write it shorter, but rarely. So how do you affect this process? So they'll hear testimony on pretty much all of their bills. You can go to the council's meetings in Rockville and speak at them. I've done that a lot. It's very fun. Honestly, you get about 3 minutes to sit there. It's very chaotic. There'll be people talking about the craziest things. I went there once. A guy was testifying about the birds and how much we need to care for the birds. So it's wonderful and you should do it. You can also send in your testimony beforehand, which is still going to be effective, but it's not going to be displayed at the meeting. And so you're not going to be shaping public opinion in the same way. You'll be shaping council members' opinions. But if you want to grow a movement, that's not the way to do it. You could also like email your council members, or you can even go out and find them on the street and talk with them. They do want to hear from you. You can call their office and ask for their help dealing with the problem, and they'll get back to you on that. They are very responsive to your needs. They want to make themselves known in the area. They want to make sure the county is doing well. And so council members, like perhaps more than any of your other politicians, your council members are your friends, and they are going to be helpful to you. And so you really want to make sure you you go reach out and you talk to them, and you'll be able to make a difference. So once the legislation gets to the executive desk, he can veto it within 10 days, which gives the council 60 days to overturn it, which they need a 6-vote, 3/5 majority to overturn it. Obviously, that'll be 7 votes when we expand. When we have the budget, which I'll get into in a different video, the executive can veto specific items from it. We call that a line item veto. But he cannot pocket veto in the way the U.S. government can. So if the bill goes on their desk for 10 days and they don't act on it, it becomes law on the 11th day. So generally, our county council does have a lot of power over the executive. The executive honestly can't check the power of the council too well at all. So once this legislation gets passed, with a couple exceptions, any piece of legislation that 5% of registered voters petition for whatever reason can go to a full voter referendum where we vote as an entire county on whether or not we want to pass legislation. In October, this would mean we need a little over 34,000 signatures, which is not super feasible. But so the petition gets filed to the Board of Elections within 90 days of it becoming law. And then we get to vote on it. And so if it's normal legislation, it will not go into effect until 30 days after our referendum passes it. If it's expedited legislation, it will stay in effect until 30 days after we vote it down in the referendum. And again, this just, you're not going to really be able to have an impact on this. There's been, as I understand it, 2 attempts at a referendum ever in county history, and neither of them worked. So a vacancy, what happens when a council member is missing? So a council member can be removed by a 6-vote supermajority, be 7 votes when the council expands. It has to happen after a public hearing. And the only reason it can happen is if they're deemed unable by reason of physical or mental disability to perform the duties of their office. This is explicitly written into the charter. So it means they cannot be impeached for, corruption or for conflict of interest or for doing their jobs poorly. They have to have some sort of disability that makes them incapable of performing their job. And okay, so that'll be a vacancy. Vacancies could also happen if somebody resigns or if somebody dies. So if that happens, the council has 30 days to vote by majority to appoint a replacement from the former council member's party. If they don't do this in 30 days, then the executive gets 10 more days to appoint a person, but it has to be the recommendation of the former council member's party's central committee. So generally, you cannot replace a Democrat with a Republican. You cannot replace a Republican with a Democrat. You have to carry over the party, which is a very good protection that's going to ensure the interests of the voters get carried over, even if it can't be the same person for whatever reason. So our charter, I've talked a lot about it. It's basically our Constitution. When we amend it, it happens with the same procedure as the state, which is it needs a 3/5 majority from the council, and then the voters have to also approve it by a majority. So our charter is incredibly long. It is probably a couple hundred pages long. It has incredibly specific laws on a bunch of subjects, especially zoning ordinances, which have an entire section with some, dozens of subsections thrown in there that are, we are incredibly specific in where you can and can't build things in this county. And one important thing to note is it does provide some protections and autonomy for our municipalities. So our incorporated towns like Rockville, Chevy Chase. But because these municipalities get their independence and they get to deal with their own tax money and whatnot, and so they have that autonomy from the county council, the council doesn't like this because they're losing money. And so they make it really hard for municipalities these days to actually, become municipalities. So it's really hard to incorporate. Like, for example, Bethesda's not incorporated. It'd be very hard to get them to because the council wants that money. And so last thing. So Montgomery County Council, they make a lot of money. I said earlier, it's about 140,000 people for the normal members. It's the highest paid county legislature in the state. And aside from our neighbors at Prince George's County, it was more than double the next highest county legislature. So we pay our legislature a lot better than everyone else. And my data on that was a little old. So our salaries increased again in 2019 to the current 140,000 level, which means this contrast between us and the next few counties is, incredibly, like, could be even higher than it was then, even more than the double that it is. But this doesn't hold true for the same in other aspects of county government, because the other counties that have a county executive pay theirs as much, if not more, than we pay our county executive, but we pay our legislature far better than theirs, and our legislature is one of the biggest in the state. So we tend to care more about our legislature here in Montgomery County than others. And here's a map to look at. You can see, obviously, Montgomery and Prince George's counties are the ones who are paying their county legislatures a lot. Then Howard and Baltimore are close up there. Then as you get out to the more rural areas, it's less. And then obviously the Eastern Shore, the entirety of the Eastern Shore is paying their legislature very little. And most of them have very small 3 or 5 person county commissions. So yeah, well, thanks for watching. Here's a list of sources you could go look at. If you wanted to learn more about these, you can also, I'll try and keep updating this. The presentation will be linked below. I'll try to update it with a new map when it comes out and whatnot. You can email me at davetalkslocalpolitics@gmail.com, and I will try to get back to you to answer your questions. But yeah, thanks for watching, and keep on going down this playlist if you want to see more videos about Montgomery County and Maryland legislature. Thank y'all.